Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stoic Munn. I'm the Director of Policy and Public Affairs at the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. I'm here with my colleague Najmal Hussain, who's one of the policy advisors at the Royal College. And we've been asked to speak for 12 minutes each. I will be talking to you about the work of our department in politics and external affairs and influencing. And then Naj will be giving you an update and introduction to the Communication Access UK initiative. We are not given time for Q&A in this, but I'll keep an eye on the chat and respond to anything I can, either during the session or afterwards. So here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is talk to you in general terms about what we do in the Policy and Public Affairs department. And you can see that there's a bunch of P's: politics, policy and partnerships. And then it also talks about campaigning. And everything we do ×4. We do it for the UK government and parliament, but also for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And I'll address some of our work in each of the 4 nations in the course of my 12 minutes. So relationships with government, parliament and politicians in their constituency role. Policy in the sense of legislation, budgets. We also get involved in NICE guidance. Of course, we work alongside our colleagues in the professional development team on much of this. Partnerships in terms of our work with Unite as the main trade union for speech and language therapists, also with allied health professional bodies, other health bodies, and then with the many charity partners that represent people who live with communication and swallowing barriers, large and small. And there's about 70 national charities that we work with, both UK-wide and Scotland. And campaigns is sometimes about awareness raising, but sometimes it's where we want a legal change. For example, what we're trying to do right now to get prescribing rights fully extended to speech and language therapists, or what we're doing to try and get apprenticeships set up in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Okay, so the role of the team, you'll see we've highlighted the key vocabulary in bold. We talk about insight, intelligence, voice, producing campaigning resources, because we know that with 22,000 members, we can't be present on the ground in every situation as we might wish to be. So there's a level at which we are capacity building within the speech and language therapy profession. And as I mentioned, all of this is now done in a basis of co-production of people with lived experience. Okay. You can try this yourself. House of Commons, you might say. Its proper name is the Palace of Westminster. This is just a point to make that when I think about my working week, yes, I think about Westminster, but I also think about Senedd Gymraeg in Cardiff, and I think about Stormont near Belfast, where I was a couple of weeks ago, and I think about the Scottish Parliament, where I used to work. And even then, that's not all, because actually we're very conscious that we have members in the Isle of Man, Jersey and Guernsey. So there are actually 7 jurisdictions that we're dealing with potentially. Okay. As professional influencers, we use matrices to determine who is it that's got the power to make the changes that we want. If you ever invite me in, we're always happy to come and work with services and colleagues that need our advice and support. And we would do something like this to try and work out who are the stakeholders that you need to work with. We'd also think about the strategy that we're going to use in a different situation. You know, on the one hand, you've got people out on the street in a demonstration fighting the cuts. On the other hand, you've got a strategy where you work quietly and perhaps invisibly inside with decision makers to try and make change constructively. And different situations call for different tactics. Okay, so that's our general approach to what we do as a department and how we think about political and policy influencing. I'm now very briefly going to run through some of the current issues that we're working on at the Royal College. These are as of this week. In fact, they've been done for a meeting of the UK-wide Adult Learning Disability Network, which is taking place tomorrow. If you came to me last week, they would have been different. If you come to me next week, they'll be different again. These constantly move with the external situation that we're facing. But what we know right now is that there is little which is bigger facing the speech and language therapy profession than there is the challenges around workforce, and particularly around vacancies. And we want to thank everyone across the UK, across the NHS, but also the independent and other sectors, who's filled in our 2 vacancy surveys. The response has been amazing. Sadly, the picture it paints, not so much, of unsustainably high vacancy levels in all sectors and settings, most egregious being NHS Children's Services in England. And that gives us the hard data that we can use to go to DFE, to go to DHSC, to go to NHS England and say, this is an emergency, you need to do something about it. I've mentioned I'll come on to the devolved nations later. In the context of England, integrated care systems and boards remain a key focus, trying to work out where things are going well, share that best practice. NHS England's workforce plan had some good stuff in it. The question is, how and where is that going to get delivered? So that's another key area of work for us. And apprenticeships, where we have for a number of years championed apprenticeships in England. It is brilliant to see them now happening and spreading, and the first cohorts of apprenticeships going through. It's good for inclusion, it's good for social justice, it's good for the future of the profession, and we'll continue to lobby to make sure that it grows. Okay. Thinking about some of the current adult work, we've been very closely involved in the intermediate care framework, which is being put together to make sure that speech and language therapy is properly recognised in the pathway. Now we have to make a reality of that on the ground. Those of you who work in the area will be familiar with the rollout of the Oliver McGowan training on a mandatory basis, and we are intimately involved in trying to make sure that that works as effectively as it can. As an example of us, you saw on that earlier slide, I talked about proactive and reactive. An example of us having to be reactive is dealing with the current autism assessment pathways, which contain a table in the appendix which does not properly recognise the role that we have in autism assessment and clinical interview. And we are working tirelessly with NHS England to get that error corrected, because we know that it's causing real difficulty on the ground. And similarly around stroke, where there's good and bad at the same time. Good guidance has been put out, but it's only as good as the resource available to meet it. And also we've had different stroke documents coming out almost at the same time, which prescribe slightly different things. So again, we're active in trying to make sure that that's resolved. To give some examples of children's work at the moment, we're working very closely with officials in the Department for Education and in the Department of Health as well, around what's come out of the SEND reform proposals in England and the proposals for early language pathfinders. There are the other areas that they promised to talk about workforce. We're also very closely involved in challenges relating to early years. And you'll see that we do that alongside the National Network of Parent Carer Forums, so that once again, we're working with people with lived experience at the heart of what we do. Okay, and we were pleased this week actually to see that some of the changes we were concerned about in the early years foundation stage, not all, but some, are now not going to go ahead. Okay, I've put in a slide about the general election because we deal in politics, and obviously it's really important as a Royal College that we are politically completely impartial. We have charitable status. Doesn't mean that we can't comment on the policies of different political parties, but we can't take a position for or against any political party. That would be against our charitable status. Right now, we have a Conservative government in the UK, and it's imperative that we work with them. Actually, the chair of the Conservative National Policy Forum is herself a speech and language therapist, and we've been able to engage with her. We've been invited to pitch to the Conservatives around early intervention. Of course, we are aware that polls at the moment suggest that the Labour Party are doing quite well. We were pleased that a submission we made with others to Labour's National Policy Forum was reflected in a speech Keir Starmer gave in the summer about evidenced early intervention in every school. That's in Labour's draft manifesto documentation. If that makes it through into the programme of a Labour government, we as an organisation and a profession are going to have to be all over making sure that that works in practice in the way that it has the potential to. Obviously, we're talking to the Shadow Secretary of State and to his policy advisor, whose mother happens to be a speech and language therapist, which is also not unhelpful. We're also engaged with the Liberal Democrats. because it could be a home parliament. We could be in coalition territory. And we're pleased to say that we now got wording again on communication need into the conference documentation of the Liberal Democrats. Now, manifestos are written a long way out. They're almost finalised, really, certainly for Labour. So during the election campaign, the 4 weeks, you'll see lots of charities go, here's our manifesto for X or Y. That's fine as a campaigning tool, but it's too late to actually influence the manifestos. But we know that we've got a lot of speech and language therapists who want to talk to their election candidates, who want to try and make a difference, who want to. So we were pulling together, and please get in touch with us if you would like to be part of a campaign group, which will be looking at eye-catching social media and other initiatives, which we'll use to raise the profile of speech, language, communication and swallowing during the run into the general election. Scotland, briefly, workforce is a priority everywhere, but we have a particular focus in Scotland around supply and funding of speech and language therapists, and a particular risk relating to local government. Scotland is still talking about having a national care service. Trying to work out what that means in practice is really important. And we're pleased that we've made some significant progress in having a children and young people's national delivery plan, which in part builds on work that we've done in Wales. So Wales here talk again about the priority of workforce planning and the way that we do that. Actually, events we've had in the Senedd most recently have been around DLD and youth justice, but we're interested in overall workforce. But it's worth saying that this builds on success in Wales about having a national children and young people's plan embedded in what the Welsh Government has done through having speech and language therapists seconded into the Welsh Government. And finally, to mention Northern Ireland, where we have an even bigger challenge because there is no functioning government in Northern Ireland. And the budgetary consequences of that are extremely severe. But the Northern Ireland team work incredibly hard within that constraint, again, to focus on workforce and supply, and also we had a recent event on DLD, and we've got a particular focus coming up in Northern Ireland around early years, and some of that working with the childminding workforce. So, as I say, just a snapshot of today. Come to me next week, I'll do a different set of slides, but the Policy and Public Affairs team are always available to offer you advice and support, to talk to your service or team, and to engage you in the political and influencing work of the Royal College just as much as you would like. Thank you all for your attention, and over to Nash.
Great, thank you very much, Derek, for that. Good afternoon all, my name is Najmal Hussain and I'm a policy advisor at the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, and I've also been leading our Communication Access UK work. So before we get going, I'm going to play you a very, very quick video.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Yes.
I want a coffee. I want a coffee.
Pardon?
I want a coffee.
Americano, latte, black, white, iced, caramel.
Menu. Menu.
It's over there. Hurry up, I've got customers waiting.
Okay, rubbish.
Charming.
So, a pretty not so serious video that, besides the fact some of our colleagues probably moonlight as actors, really does have more of a serious point. The fact that communication difficulties present a barrier to accessing the most basic services, whether that's buying a coffee, to accessing goods and services, to accessing healthcare, economic opportunities. People with communication difficulties face barriers every day, and because of that lack of understanding, that lack of seriousness given to that need. And it's for that very reason that we have been on this mission to give people with communication difficulties parity with people with other kinds of disabilities, to create a greater recognition of communication needs, and quite simply to give those many millions of people across the UK with communication needs a voice. And we have been working to do that through the introduction of the communication access symbol, which you can see on your screen. That is a disability access symbol that we have launched, akin to existing disability access symbols, such as the wheelchair access symbol, commonly known as the International Symbol of Access, the visual and hearing impairment symbols, each of which display the availability of a reasonable adjustment. In the case of the International Symbol of Access, that could be a ramp, that could be an accessible toilet, and in the case of the hearing impairment symbol, that could also be a T-loop. But of course, in the case of the communication access symbol, we wanted that to be the availability of inclusive communication or an inclusive communication system in place to support people with communication needs. We've been on this journey since 2016, inspired by the work of legendary speech and language therapist Catherine Harris, who unfortunately could not be here today, as well as similar initiatives in play in Australia and Canada. And this work was initiated by our partner Communication Matters, who brought the vision to us in 2016. The initiative is led by the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists in partnership with Communication Matters, Stroke Association, the Motor Neuron Disease Association, the Macedon Charity, Disability Rights UK, Headway, the Brain Injury Charity, the Business Disability Forum, as well as the National Network of Parent Carer Forums. And of course, when Communication Matters brought this vision to us, we embraced it fully. We held a symposium where we invited over 60 charitable organisations from across the UK, which then allowed us to again refine that vision, establish our steering group consisting of the partners that I then mentioned, and we were then able to initiate this work. Many members on the call will know about the existing evidence based around inclusive communication, but we wanted the voice of service users to really help us set the direction of this work, and of course, we wanted the service user voice to be prevalent across the whole of this initiative. And so we decided to consult. We asked service users what they wanted the symbol to look like, testing existing concepts. And we also asked service users what they felt a good communication experience was. And through those various phases of consultation, we received over 6,000 responses, 26% of which were from people who identified as having a real communication need. We refined those responses. We used the outputs of those responses to refine a design for the communication access symbol. And we were also able to develop a set of standards, which then in order to underpin a training package, which we then tested across a pilot, which we called an early adopters phase. This saw face-to-face training delivered by speech and language therapists, supported by service users, including AAC users, across the UK. We engaged a range of sectors, which allowed us to prove that our concept worked. We then used the outputs of that round, refined and supported by the University of Leeds, to develop the final product, i.e. the Communication Access symbol, and the Communication Access UK initiative as it currently stands, launching in November 2020. This is just an example of some of the organisations that had helped us through the early adopters phase. We saw banks and building societies involved, to market traders, to corner shops, to high street traders, to local authorities, to NHS trusts. We really had a range of organisations from across the UK, including Scotland, England, Northern Ireland and Wales, which allowed us to collect fairly robust data that allowed us then to refine the set of standards as they currently are within this framework, which also then allowed us to define actions to allow organizations and individuals to meet the standards, as well as operational indicators. These were further refined by a number of speech and language therapists representing each of the nations from across the UK. We were also able to use the outputs of the early adopters phase to develop a mnemonic to support the key principles of our training, i.e. to give people time, ask them what helps, to listen and look, but also to keep trying. We were then able to translate our training package into a more accessible and scalable e-learning solution, including 4 modules. I apologize for the slide. It's gone slightly wrong there, but the 4 modules include an introductory module to support a better understanding of what communication difficulties are, a module to support better face-to-face communication, a module to support better communication over the phone, and a module to support and reinforce better written communication. All of which now sits on our website, www.communication-access.co.uk, which anybody can access and sign up as either an individual or an organization to either complete the training package as an individual and receive a dated certificate, or seek accreditation as an organization as communication accessible and then be placed on our directory. Our process is very simple. You either sign up as an individual or an organization, you complete the training, you commit to our standards, you receive a certificate and accreditation, and you're then able to display the symbol in perpetuity. We will never actively deter you from displaying the communication access symbol. And in a year's time, you're asked to reaccredit. And for an individual, that simply means for you to log in, complete the training again, and get another certificate. And for organizations, we'll simply ask you how you're doing on your journey. Are you able to meet the initial commitments that you made to us as part of your initial accreditation? And are you able to, and if not, why not? It gives you an opportunity to take stock, but also gives us a KPI. And since our launch, Communication Access UK has become the RCSLT's first multi-award winning initiative, a point of pride for me. And of course, since November 2020, over 60,000 people have completed or been committed to complete the training package. We have over 15,000 signups on the website alone, and that's growing every day. But we do continue our work to give this symbol parity with other disability access symbol, to mainstream this and to ensure that this is as recognizable as other disability access symbols. And of course, we can only do this with support from the speech and language therapy profession. Many speech and language therapists have been championing this across their communities and across the services and trusts that they work, and we encourage you to continue to do so. As you're aware, this symbol will create greater accessibility to goods and services for people with communication needs. We found this to really help support and reduce social isolation and improve the quality of life for people who have communication difficulties. It does help in the increasing of public awareness and understanding of those needs, and of course develops to and contributes to the development of staff to enable them to deliver higher quality customer services. We know a better communication experience is always a better customer service experience, and of course it will support any businesses and organizations to meet their obligations under the Equality Act 2010. So thank you very much. That was my very, very quick presentation of what Communication Access UK is. We had a surgery earlier on today where many colleagues attended and asked a number of questions around the initiative. But if you have any further questions, please do get in touch. My details are on the screen. Thank you again for listening, and I'm going to finish off with one more video. Thank you.
This project will hopefully make this world a better place and a safer place for people who stammer and with different communication needs.
I am fast learning, but I am slow to reply. Please give me time.
People might not see my disability, and sometimes people might not see I have a problem.
I have cerebral palsy, which make my body do different things to my brain ask me to.
Having stammered since I first spoke, It can affect me in different ways, in different circumstances, depending on who I'm talking to, depending on where I am, depending on who's there.
I think communication access is important because communication is our way of interacting with other people, and to be able to understand people and to give people time to understand and to make relationships with people through the communication is vital.
Hopefully having something communication signal could maybe let people to be understanding of the fact that I can take what you're saying, but you kind of need to maybe help me a little bit.
It's good to teach people a really appropriate way of communicating with people with communication needs.
Every one of those who's educated around this area, it will only help any of us who've got issues with communication.
This potential for people who will be trained to actually help you think, flip it out, this is more than you could imagine, honestly.
Because I believe everyone is the same.
Thank you, Naj. And thank you to everyone who's engaged in the chat. I've seen questions on workforce, on apprenticeships, on the general election, on LSEC, on getting the Welsh version of Communication Access UK, which we know is much, much needed. We will respond to as many of those as we can, as quickly as we can, by one means or another. Thank you all for your attention on Public Affairs Lightning Talks today, and we look forward to working with as many of you as possible in the future. Good afternoon.